So, a very good evening, all of you. Vanakkam, Namaskar. Welcome to another appetizing event of Suryodaya Literary Forum. And today, our guest of honor is an author whose life is straight out of a novel. A dashing Italian who came as a tourist to India only to find the love of his life and settle down here. His name is as intriguing as his books. And if you feel that it reminds you of pizza, you are not alone. A Swiss born fiction and non-fiction writer, Carlo Pizzati, is an award winner. He's an award winning journalist for Italian dailies La Repubblica and La Stampa. Thank you, Carlo, for being here today with us on our forum. His books are as flavorful as the famous Italian dish that all Indians love, pizza. We'll find out the story of scared snakes in his kitchen, pesky rats living in and around the washing machine, toads and 18 stray dogs as the show progresses. Right, Carlo? Am I right?
Correct. Yes. You're making me hungry with all this talk of pizza. I'm missing it.
Yeah. Can a backache be cured through yoga and lead to answers about your past birth? Where does an author get his inspiration from? How does it feel to be a Mapillai or son-in-law of India? Vanakkam Mapillai. We'll find out answers to all these questions from Carlos himself. So let's, my dear friends, fasten our seatbelts as we go for a world tour through the book Bending Over Backwards by Carlo Pizzati. So we are all ready to take off, Carlo? Over to you.
Ready. Thank you very much, Rachna, for the invitation. Thank you, Sonali and Millennium Mams, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you. We will go for a world tour. I think what we agreed, I'll start with about 10 minutes story of my life, or how I arrived at bending over backwards. Then for 20 minutes, we'll talk about 20 minutes, talk about bending over backwards. And then we'll open up to your questions for the other half hour, which is the thing I enjoy the most is the questions and the dialogue with readers and with people who have questions or are curious about this book or about what I write. So the story begins in 1966 in Geneva, in Switzerland, where I was born. But I didn't stay long in the land of cuckoo clocks and yummy chocolate, because 3 weeks later, I was brought over back to Italy, to the valley where my parents are from, in a town called Valdagno, which is a valley north of Venice, which is also kind of infamous for the fact that it has the highest concentration in Italy of priests, nuns, suicides, alcoholics, and lap dance bars in the province. And also it is the second rainiest place in north of it, in all of Italy, actually. So you can see why at the age of 16, I was trying to get out of there, even though, I mean, the truth be told, I am quite fond of that place. I have all my youthful friends there, and I go back every summer to visit them. And it was important to give me a sort of ethics towards work, because this is a very industrious part of Italy, one of the most industrialized parts of Italy, where Benetton and Stefanel and the Luxottica, the big Italian brands, are from. And they have a very serious work ethic. So the mountainous landscape and this industrious attitude kind of helped me build a strong character, strong enough to leave home at 16 to go and live in Florida, in Pensacola, where I was an exchange student, and where I stayed for about 4 years before moving to, I got my diploma at 17. And I started to support myself and pay myself through college and university, very much of an American dream sort of way. Soon enough, I wanted, Florida and Pensacola was a bit small and I had bigger ambitions. So I moved to Washington, DC. I studied international studies there. I was told in Pensacola that the DC stands for doesn't care. but because they have a feeling that the politics there is not so interested in what's outside of Washington. It was fascinating for me to study international studies with people who had been economists for President Jimmy Carter, or had been in the Israeli Six-Day War, or in the coup in Iran in 1979. So they're really protagonists of history. They were my teachers there. But then I moved to New York. At 21, I was lucky enough to start working at La Repubblica, the newspaper I'm still writing for. So it's been many, many, many years, on and off, because I took a break, as I'll tell you. And New York was excellent because it also taught me the American work ethic. It was a capital of communication at the time. And I had the fortune of being exposed to great personalities, both in the arts, music, intellectuals. I interviewed Noam Chomsky and economists like Kenneth Galbraith, but I was also able to see, I don't know, Prince, Mike Tyson, Michael Jackson in their heyday. So it was quite exciting to be 21 until 27 in New York. But eventually, so the 11 years in America Americanized me, definitely, from the Italian, from the provinces that I was, and the Florida, of the South. But it was time to move back to Rome to work for La Repubblica and to be assigned the international environmentalism beat, which means I covered like radioactive smuggling from nuclear power plants in northern Russia, or I went to see whale hunting ships in Norway and to report about that, because my beat was talking about nature conservancy, pollution, our relationship with the environment, which is how I ended up getting arrested by the French Foreign Legion in the Pacific Ocean when I went on a Greenpeace ship that was protesting against nuclear testing by the French in the Pacific Ocean, which is one of the adventures of that period of life, which ended when the editor-in-chief of the newspaper asked me to move to Latin America, where I was correspondent for 3 years. And I wrote a novel out of that experience called Ni Modo, which is a Mexican expression which sort of means I kind of accept the fate that is coming to me, even though I could have changed that fate that I have to accept. It was quite exciting. I covered the guerrilla war in Colombia, in Mexico, in Chiapas. I went to the funeral of Che Guevara in Cuba, which, as you might know, his body was discovered 30 years after his death. So I went also to Bolivia, where he was killed. But I was also interviewing presidents that were being elected. The center left was having a moment in the southern cone of America at the time, or South America. And so the Italian papers were interested in that. And it was quite exciting again. It was time to get back to Italy again after 3 years, and to Spain, where I was involved in a startup, internet startup. We started a website in year 2000, so quite ahead of the time, and then in Italy as well. And then I was also in Italian television as a talk show host and a producer of a daily political talk show every morning on Italian national TV. Around 2005, 2004, 2006, I decided to take a nice severance pay for my last job and dedicate myself to what I've always wanted to do all along, which was writing books. I had written novels already, but I had not dedicated myself full time, which is what I decided to do then. And I started from that moment on, writing and publishing novels, nonfiction, interviews, and also collection of short stories. In fact, I have a collection of short stories which should be coming out with HarperCollins this fall, the second one that I will publish. So this was a bit of a moment of crisis for me in a way, positive sense. I didn't feel at the time, of course, because when you're going through a crisis, you don't think that there will be something positive from it. You're just suffering. I was not necessarily confused, but it was in a moment of shift. The mother of my child had decided to separate, so that was a bit of a difficult time for me. I had decided to stop journalism for a while to dedicate myself to writing my first novel and my books. So that took a lot of courage at the moment. And in general, I was beginning to be middle-aged. So, you know, you start thinking about life changing and the passage of time. But actually, and here we can start getting into the beginning of bending over backwards. This is how I arrived at bending over backwards through the arc of my life. And I've always liked in my books to talk about, to draw from my personal experience. I call my books memovels, a bit memoirs and novels. And sometimes they're called novels, but they're actually a lot memoirs. Sometimes they're called memoirs, like in the case of Bending Over Backwards, but they're a little bit novels as well. So in the middle of this life, as Dante said in the Divine Comedy, I found myself in a dark forest. No, this is the midlife crisis Dante has, and produces that wonderful piece of literature which gave birth to our language, to Italian. On my little thing, I tried to investigate something much more pedestrian, which was a terrible backache, which had tortured me for quite a few years, and which was due to the fact that I have a very bad posture, as I have now as well. And scoliosis, lordosis, sciatica, it was all adding up. And this is what gave me the idea of documenting this journey. I didn't know in the beginning, of course, all I wanted to do is to feel better and being able to sleep and not feel getting stabbed in the scapula in the back of my neck by this pain. But slowly I realized that there was a story developing and that there was quite interesting. It started in my hometown, Vicenza, let's say north of my, near my hometown, the biggest city near my hometown, where my mother now lives, which is north of Venice, where I went to visit a dentist because a friend of mine told me that he has an interesting alternative technique. And so he kept calling me old buddy, which I found strange because he was older than me. I was getting already nervous and feeling a back pain out of that anxiety of being called old buddy. But he convinced me to install some sort of prosthesis in my teeth, which I still have here, because he said that they communicated, the mucous membrane of my lips communicated the position of my back and would make me stand straighter. So I let him do that, even though full of doubts, and I didn't really feel any great relief. So I decided that I would continue on my quest when I was invited by a very good friend to go to Boulder, Colorado, to his wedding. And Boulder is a bit of a new age capital, and there is all kinds of things there, sage burning and you know, everything that new age not started there, but definitely has found a lot of new age millionaires to promote it to the rest of the world there. And I continued my practice of Ashtanga yoga I had learned in Argentina with a very good teacher who was a student of Sri Patabi Joyce, who's a discoverer of Ashtanga from Mysore. And also I was Rolfed. So there was a lady that put her elbows in my back in a very painful manner and told me that I should walk like a fox on the snow, and was trying to straighten out my position. And it worked momentarily, but as soon as I got on a flight out of Boulder, my back started to hurt again. And I was then landing into Los Angeles, where I went to visit another friend and my sister who lives in Los Angeles. And at a party, I met Catherine, one of these, again, new age Americans who convinced me that she would have the solution for my backache and invited me to her house with my friend Jamil and told me that I should just sit on the couch, applied sensors to my forehead, to my ankles and to my wrists and to my chest, and took a sort of like a quantic biofeedback photograph of my aura and of my past incarnation. So she told me that the problem with my back had nothing to do with anything I was doing wrong, which I found to be a relief, but that the problem was social crime that a prior incarnation of mine had committed in the 1600s. So I was quite a rationalist, and I still am. And I was a little bit surprised by the fact that the machine, first of all, I wasn't sure about the existence of the soul or reincarnation. But secondly, I found it fascinating that if there is such a thing as a soul, a machine could actually photograph it. So that night, when I was sort of reflecting upon the experience, I thought that it would be worthy to start considering, especially how our relationship with technology is increasing and it has increased a lot more since 2007 in the direction I was sort of predicting back then, our symbiosis with our gadgets like this phone, how possibly an algorithm could actually help us understand what is spirituality. Like, how is it possible? It seemed to be like such distant things at the time, at least, before I started this investigation. So as a rationalist, I decided to run in the middle of the road without being judgmental and begin a parallel quest. One for the relief, to find a relief for my back pain, and at the same time investigate what this relationship between technology and spirituality could mean, which has taken on larger and larger meanings now, of course. So I flew back to Italy. My back was still hurting, unfortunately, so that has not found a relief. So the quest went on. I was invited to a trance music rave party on the mountains above Cinque Terre in the north of Italy. And there I witnessed something that was called a spiritual healing ceremony on the dance floor. There were people dancing and making some strange gestures. Someone was falling sick and someone was trying to heal them with a dance, which I found fascinating. And so I interviewed them to discover what they were doing, or what they thought they were doing, and how this healing took place. So I documented that as well. And I started to investigate in the relationship between the invisible and suffering somehow. Whether or not I believe that, I think it's not important, because I try to relate what people told me and relate what I saw without adding anything of my personal beliefs. I also was trying to keep as independent of what was happening as possible. After that, the friend who had invited me to this trance rave party told me, because she found out about my back pain, that she could have some very good healers in Argentina. So I took a plane, again, hurting my back because all those flights were really not helping my sciatica and my lordosis and my scoliosis and all the trouble with the back pain. And I landed in Buenos Aires, and we drove up to the mountains of north of Argentina, which was already had a sort of a mystical, legendary history, because in theory, as I call it history, they say that even an unidentified foreign object had landed there. There's a lot of theories there, of course, unproven. What was interesting for me was meeting Ivana, this healer who was exercising a very deep, painful massage on my pain spots in my back, inducing visions, meaning that she asked me to visualize what I was seeing and translating those visions into what they meant psychologically. So I found that very, very fascinating, because it was a shamanic approach which had some psychological underlying meanings, which I investigated. And I found it fascinating because it brought me towards understanding an approach to healing that was detached from a mechanical cure, from ointments or only physiotherapies, but to try to understand if there is some sort of root of the pain, which is obviously psychological, and alternative ways of looking at it, aside from psychoanalysis, of course. But then the technology and spirituality aspect came in again, because I met another healer called Radnaxan, who had another contraption called the Kirlian camera, which took a photograph of my torso, and where this healer said he saw some images that was anthropomorphic, sort of transmitting an image that looked like a human's, sort of a devilish features. And so he was trying to convince me that there was the image of the demon that was possessing my torso, and then he would give me an exorcism, which was kind of costly at the time. And since I was financing all this by myself, I was worried also about the bill I was going to receive. And I won't go in all the details of how I got out of that, because I'd like you to read it. But it again made me investigate further what this means. Of course, charlatans abound in this realm, but there are also some lessons that I thought would be very useful to look at from a scientific point of view, because some people do heal, maybe for the simple placebo effect, of course. And so I just thought it would be time to open a door between these different worlds, scientific medicine and alternative cures by simply relating my experience with a neutral point of view. Time to fly back to Italy, still with my pain in the back and no solution. So I decided, even though I am not Christian, because being born in Switzerland and having kind of coming from an original family, I was not christened, but I grew up in a very Catholic context. So I ended up meeting a Catholic priest, which is kind of had an important medical role in the Vatican. He was a friend of an aunt of mine, and discussing suffering with him. And his point of view was that according to their faith, you have to live with suffering. And so there was not much of a solution for my back pain because I wanted to stop suffering. But it was very interesting theologically to understand what the relationship with the suffering meant for them. And this is when I started to look into meditation, transcendental meditation, and I met a very good teacher who actually had learned from Ramana Maharshi's tradition in Arunachala. So he was an Italian teaching meditation techniques of the Hindu meditation techniques in Italy. And so I started to investigate those. And I described the technique with the Japamala and the mantra that I learned. I described that in the book and what it means to me within the context of the search for a cure for a backache. So this is what led me to finally approach my trip to India, my first journey to India, which was something that I had postponed for a long time because I was one of those people who were one of those velles or goras, as you would say up north, who was terrified of coming to India because I had read too many Kipling books and was too misinformed. And so I was terrified of getting dengue, malaria, and other also non-transmittable diseases like leprosy and elephantiasis. But you know, I was one of those people. I arrived in India with a portable water purifier because I wanted to avoid dying of dehydration, not knowing that India is covered with plastic bottles from water you can buy at any corner. So this is how misinformed I was when I arrived in 2008 to study Yoga Ashtanga with Sri Patabi Joyce a few months before he died. I had the fortune of studying with him in Mysore, and that helped actually. Honestly, that really helped my back pain. Although not if you stop the practice, it comes back, of course. But I found that I discovered many interesting things in the practice in Mysore. Then I went to meditate in Arunachala with this teacher and a bunch of Italian meditators, and we did the pradakshina, walking barefoot around the holy mountain of Arunachala, learning the mantras and reciting singing the bhajan, and that was quite fascinating. Led me to also seek some Ayurvedic cures for my back pains in Kovalam with Dr. Shambhu, which again allowed me to investigate yet another aspect of a cure that I could find for my back pain. And that ended having a very interesting experience. It brings us towards the end of the book, because I don't want to take too much time, which was very, very odd for me, because again, as a rationalist, it was hard to decode rationally, which was a past life experience, a guided meditation in which I was asked to relax and investigate what I was told would be a past life experience, and which materialized in my visions very, very, very clearly and distinctly as someone who lived in the 1200s, a crusader, and in seeing the face of a few friends that actually I have in this lifetime, like someone that didn't exactly look like that, but I knew that it was them, and also of a woman who I did not recognize from this life, who I had an attraction for and an unsolved love story with, which weirdly enough is someone that I met just after this experience, which happened in near Pondicherry, near Oroville, where I now normally live, about an hour north of Oroville in the same coast. And it's someone that I met shortly after, like the day after, in Chennai, which eventually ended up becoming my wife and bringing me back to live in India. But that's a whole other story, which I wrote in another book, which is the sequel of Bending Over Backwards, which is called Maapile. So that's how Bending Over Backwards ends. But I just thought very briefly what I could do. I could read you the last 4 paragraphs of Bending Over Backwards to tell you what were the lessons that I've learned, I suppose, what the takeaways from this book. It will be quick. It's really the last few pages of chapter 23, which is called Bending Over Backward, just like the title of the book. To me, bending over backwards, as breathless and palpitating as it always leaves me, the position in yoga, represents the entire story recounted in these pages. To try and go beyond yourself, instead of stooping forward, turning yourself over and opening up entirely at the risk of falling and hurting yourself, all in order to bring about the deep, needed, and thorough change. Thus, the search for a cure for my backache has clearly become just a pretext to change myself. Without this change, I would not have been able to move to India. I told myself I was trying to fix a pain in my spine, but I was really trying to heal from a deeper wound. I wanted to transform myself, and it happened. Things did change radically in my life. I abandoned the West and its constant political and economic strife and incessant bickering, which I still follow from afar, and I moved permanently to India. I live peacefully near a fishing village on the coast of Tamil Nadu. In the past few years, I've learned to integrate to survive bureaucracy, traffic, monsoon floods, and some occasional stomach bugs. They're not happening anymore. I try to blend in. Chennai eventually grows on you. Once it does, its sweet embrace won't let you go. It's a love-hate relationship, I admit. As conditions are at times difficult for someone who grew up in a small city with an alpine climate. But India has kept me here. While I finish these pages, I look down at my right wrist and I see the triple red thread tied months ago at the Ashtalakshmi temple in Besan Nagar when I went on a visit with my friend Hari, a reminder of my connection to this land. I don't know if I can attribute this change in me to a divine design, but I do feel more balanced in my existence here in India. That old search for a physical cure took me on paths where I discovered new ways to see myself. Searching for bodily relief, I unlocked something more profound. In a way, I died and was reborn, and I ended up finding a new and better life. So that's
Wow.
the end of Going Backwards.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you for sharing
Thank
your interesting story and your powerful thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you
Now
for
I
listening.
would like to hand over to Sonali for Q&A. Sonali.
Thank you, Rachna. Thank you, Carlo, for sharing your inspiring journey. I was lucky to meet you in person in Jan 2020 in a Lit Fest in Calcutta, where I was amazed by your humbleness. Thank you for honoring our request and joining our forum.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sonali.
The candid narrative in your book, Bending Over Backwards, is commendable. You describe your fears and agony. It becomes relatable for us readers because as adults, almost everyone has gone through physical pain themselves or has seen someone go through it. Despite your disappointments, you keep on trying. You go all in. You face your fears and you express it in your writing stunningly and add humor in all the right places, making it a light read in spite of the pain and the letdowns. My first question to you, you grew up in Italy, moved to US and lived there almost for a decade and then relocated places finally to settle here in India. How has living in these places shaped you and your writing?
Well, as I sort of introduced the topic in the beginning of our chat, it affected me greatly because it also pushed me to investigate identity in many of my books. In Bending Over Backwards as well, I suppose there is some of that, especially in the part where the second part, the part of in India, because that puts in very often Velas and Goras put in question their identities when they come here, which is one of the great gifts that India has to give, right, to people with a different upbringing, with a different, a little bit more rigid upbringing, I suppose, Western upbringing. So India definitely, of course, that's the last chapter. But I say that all the steps added and changed. I mean, I think the Western part does need to be divided in a certain way from the Asian experience. Although growing up, I think there is another great lesson, which is not just traveling and living in different countries. Because in America, I Americanized. I learned what their work ethic is, the feeling of solitude you have in America you don't have anywhere else, and how self-sufficiency, how to become truly and deeply self-sufficient, even emotionally, which America can teach at a very high cost for people who come from family-orientated cultures like ours, Indians and Italians. So there are great lessons there. New York, again, like I said, incredible in those times to have to bring up to speed your thinking, to keep up with some of the best minds there at the time were in the world there in New York. So that affected me. Living in Spain, living in Latin America allowed me, as I wrote in that novel, to become not more fatalistic, but more acceptant of a different sense of time, for example, which is what I learned in Mexico, which makes it then much easier in India also to not be upset about sometimes lack of punctuality or things like that, which in Italy we have as well, because we're a similar country as well. So sense of humor you have in Mexico and Latin America. So the new, different sense of humor from the Italian one, from the Indian one. So that is very important to see what people laugh at, for example. But then, aside from these clear life experiences, there is also literature. And so actually reading Tagore in middle school in Italy, which is an important writer in Italy, for example, and reading also the way in which Western writers have translated what they understood of the Asian experience. So yes, Siddhartha was a very important book, which brought, introduced a different thinking, Buddhism, Hinduism, into me as a young person as well. So there is also that capacity for cultures to have a dialogue with each other. So even though all these different steps in my meandering nomadic life have contributed to create someone who is hard to identify as an Italian, even though I love the pizza analogy that you made in Rachna in the beginning, which again makes me quite my mouth watery now. So because you are who you where your identity is connected to where you grew up in the first 16, 17 years of your life. So that's inextricable. But at the same time, your question opens up a world of non-answers, which is, who are you once you have had so much influences? And I think that the answer is that it's not important. You are that sum of things. So which are hard to label, which makes hybrid personality sometimes scary, because it's not as easy to pinpoint them. I live with this ambiguity quite happily, having the fortune of sharing with my wife, who's equally ambiguous because she's also half Welsh, half Indian, and she's nomadic as I am. So at least I have found someone who is a twin soul in that uh, international personality, let's call it, or cosmopolitan.
Yes, thank you for answering. I'll take question from the members. Jyoti Vadva for the next question.
Your journey seems to be really intriguing and very profound. I'm really amazed, and I would have two questions. First is the term you use, technology with spirituality. I have never heard or thought of that. So create a bit, and all of it is very close to my heart since my childhood. So how are you loving it or living it?
Wait, so the first question is because the video interrupted for a moment when you were saying technology and spirituality.
And spirituality. Yes, yes.
The question was?
I have never heard, never thought on it, in fact, I would say.
You never thought of that relationship?
Yes.
Well, as if you read the book, I think that I found the best answer to that here in India, which was the most spiritual one, which was, look, if you believe in spirituality, the spirituality can inhabit everything, even inanimate objects, rocks, stones. If it's everywhere, then it is inside technology. So even the idea that Ray Kurzweil, this thinker in America, has of singularity, the possibility that computers will be the next stage of evolution, that humanities will download its conscience into a server. I mean, it's science fiction, right? But we can think about that. From a spiritual point of view, it's not important because spirituality is not connected to humanity, it's connected to the spirit. And so the most fascinating question, answer to the question about the relationship for me was, who cares? Because if a spirituality, spirit, soul is everywhere, it doesn't matter if it's in a computer, and it doesn't matter how it declines itself. That's a beautiful game of Maya, of illusion. It doesn't matter. I found that the most wise response that I found in and the deepest replies to me, it was very reassuring in a way also. And sorry, the second question?
Second question is, you are in Oroville, right now?
No, I'm not in Oroville. I am about 45 minutes north of Oroville. I've been there, I've written about it, but I don't belong to that community, although there are a few Italians there. And there is some good pizza there, by the way.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take my next question here. For the audience in general who are yet to read your book, which is the strangest experience in your journey you had to go through to find the cure for back pain? And if you could share any memorable anecdote which got edited from the book.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, no, I mean, I do know the answer, but I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about it here. But I think that if those who have read the book know that I guess the strangest experience was down in Kovalam, from investigating Ayurvedic cures. Meaning, okay, let's talk about it seriously without the hang-ups of Avelle. But the big enema applied to a pitta type of physical type, as most Europeans are, and especially Italians. For those who are familiar with those gunas, with the pitta, kapha, vata, the tendencies that are there. For me, it was interesting to accept something as discomforting and as odd and slightly repulsive as the idea of a big enema for someone that with my background, because it's associated with just gastrointestinal disturbances. But this was actually something that was connected to the nervous system. And so to go in depth in understanding why the Vata personality is asked to induce vomit, and so whereas a pitta has the big enema applied with the herbs and the concoctions. For me, it was again another step in changing and looking at aspects that may be weird from my point of view and accepting them. So for me, that was the strangest experience. At the same time, it was also the most revealing in the cultural hang-ups of the cultural provenance, because this is an alternative by Western standards, an alternative medicine that yet is more ancient than Western medicine, and so it would require, from the Western point of view, to be studied and to discover that there are chemical components of these herbs that have healing qualities, and the way they're used may be just the best way they can be used. So for me, that was the I suppose the strangest experience that required me to break through my own limits. So in a way, and so I didn't edit that out, and I cannot think of anything that I edited out, because I've really made an attempt, not just in this book, but in general, not to edit things out, to be really honest and courageous, even in lose this idea. And this I mean, meditation and yoga and reading the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and understanding the Indian philosophy, let's call it, because it belongs to both Buddhism and Hinduism, has helped a lot, Jainism as well, in working on the ego and of not being afraid of exposing it. And so editing it out would be a need to protect something from my ego. So I try to not do that, like writing about the big anime experience, for example, without being embarrassed about it.
Yes. Thank you for the honest answer. I'll invite Suchi for the next question.
Hi, Carlos. It
Hi.
was a very, very interesting read, more so because of the mention of yoga, meditation, and India. So, my question to you is that we notice in the book that you constantly introspected your every move. So, do you think introspection plays a very important role in the transformation that we all are seeking?
Well, that's an excellent question. Thank you. Because I think that the answer is that introspection played a relevant role for someone with my mentality to bring about change. Someone who was, again, a rationalist and maybe thinking and overthinking things. I think if you're able to find a change or a solution by instead, I think I do hint about that in my meditation chapters, by leaving the idea of thought, that's when also change actually comes about. But as a writer, my purpose and my mission was to document my experience as well. So the introspection had become necessary, but I don't know if I think as a writer, I have to say yes to your question in the sense that for me, journaling, and I began before that writing in depth and introspecting about what I was feeling when I was going through the crisis before this whole journey happened of bending over backwards. And I found a relief in that because there's a beautiful expression by Paul Valéry, this French poet and intellectual, who talks about the power of thought, which can and should be captured as if it were put into an electrical wire, and that writing has this impact on the power of your thoughts. And so for me, to organize my thoughts in a linear way, instead of allowing the confusion of my emotions and my thoughts to continually take over my conscious state, allowed me to understand what I was actually thinking and to go back and look at it and to put it to the test. And so if you don't do that, I think for me at least, I can only speak for myself, so I cannot teach what is the path for somebody else. But for me, it was necessary because otherwise my thoughts would be more randomic and maybe would not bring me back to understand things that I thought made sense. They might not make sense and there may be no sense, but to me, creating a sense in the story helped me find some more organization into my life and into a direction I could take. But then again, meditation teaches you instead to abandon thought, and that brings such a state of relaxation that may be the catalyst for change. So I'm open to both possibilities.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Meghna Bajoria for the next question.
Good evening, Carlo. I was completely fascinated by your entire journey. And my question is that amongst all, you've gone through so many things, experimented with so many things from chanting to Ayurveda to yoga and so much more. What do you feel has worked the most for you and what do you keep revisiting in your life? And how is your back now?
Well, that I was expecting that question. But my standard answer to that is you have to read the book. But I mean, you've read
I've
it,
read,
so
yes. But personally, like no editing.
No, I'll give you the answer to that. No, what I learned. Okay, first of all, the most useful thing was meditation, and I still practice it. It's been. And yoga as well. Yoga I practice a little less because I've done physiotherapy, which asked me to do less yoga for other problems, and so. But I can still do my Ashtanga series more or less, and I find that combined with meditation is those two things have been obviously the practice and the understanding of the discipline, which then you can apply to jogging in the morning and eating well, and a lot of other things, and the hygienic things that you learn in India as well, just by living here and observing certain practices that are followed by a lot of people that are quite healthy. That method, the capacity to fall into a method that at the service of your own health without becoming obsessive, but simply showing up for that. And so meditation and yoga, I have to say, that are the things that I carry still with me. I've not gone to a rave parties in a few years now, so no, maybe that's for fun, I suppose, for some people. But I think that's what has brought about, what has helped the most. About my back, I think that the answer is, again, connected to the first part of your question, which is the back is doing better. When I talk about chronic backache, it means that it's chronic, and so it's always there. So all you can do is find a way to counter it, and that way has to constantly be there. So now I'm doing different exercises and meditation to strengthen different parts of the back. But the thing is the mental resolve of not feeling defeated, not caving into suffering, remembering that the discipline is what helps you against the suffering. That's the greatest lesson for me from bending over backwards. To remember that, not fall back in slothfulness and laziness, which comes from the fatigue that is brought about by suffering. So it is a mental mechanism, if you can set it into motion, to remind yourself that there is a way out. It just requires showing up every day, every morning against that pain. So the back at this moment is doing well, but it's because I've been losing weight and doing quite well. As soon as I stop following my own advice, it comes back with a vengeance. So
Great advice. Thank you so much, Carlo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rachna, for the next question.
Yeah, Carlo, I would like to know about your entrepreneur side. I read that about your project to produce affordable football shoes for Indian girls. So what made you think about it, and how is it going?
Well, it was a great idea that started thanks to my son, who has been coming to India regularly. He lives in Rome, but he comes to India. He's been coming in the summers and not every summer, but summers and Christmas vacations. And he just noticed people playing barefoot. Of course, on the beach, it makes sense, but sometimes it can be not as comfortable on hard ground. And football has been, or soccer, football has become more and more popular in India. And he just thought, like, why aren't there more football shoes? And we started thinking about what we could do to get organized to provide people who cannot afford football shoes but want to play this sport, which is a very good team sport and very healthy as well. And so he started designing shoes because he was very interested in it at the time, and was into playing football and into the style of the shoes. So he designed 4 different types, which we call the 4 elements, because air, water, like for each element he had an idea and a style. And then we got in touch with NGOs here throughout India, who got very excited about the idea, and got some Italian entrepreneurs involved, people who have done these things there, who volunteered their time, and also some people here in India, some athletes here in India as well. Some Devaram, who's a tennis champion, who devoted some of his time to work on this, and to start building the prototypes. So the prototypes were made, and then they were sent around to Nagaland, to the Northeast, to Jharkhand, to different parts of Ranchi, in different parts of India. They were tested, and they loved the style, the Italian style, and with the Indian colors, though, on the colors of the Indian flags on the shoes, just the color, not the flag, but just a reference to an Indian flavor. And so then it was it's a little bit stalled there, because we needed to move production into India, because it would have been cheaper to produce them in China. And I am not actually an entrepreneur. I invented myself as an entrepreneur for this project at the service of the enthusiasm of my son and the idea of helping, giving back to India in a way, in my way. But we looked at different possibilities of how to produce them here in India by bringing some machinery from Italy and teaching how to use it. But right now, it's stopped there. It would need more of a collaboration from entrepreneurs here in India. I've reached out, but then I was taken by my books. The project is there for the taking and for the picking, but it's not into full production. So we're not yet producing the shoes. The plans are there, the capacity is there. I would have to start an NGO. And I have to tell you the truth, there is also, of course, in the process of starting an NGO, sometimes bureaucracy doesn't work the way it should work. And so it got stalled there as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next question, Sonali.
Sareen for the next question.
Hi, Carlo. You have
Hi.
written beautifully about your unique journey about searching for a cure for your back pain. So I was wondering if you have any strange, funny writing habits that you follow and you want to share with the audience today?
Any strange, funny writing?
Writing habits which you follow, which helps you think out of the box, or the process of writing?
Oh, good. I mean, I take a lot of notes. I don't know if I have any. I mean, I don't know if obsessive compulsive is not the appropriate term probably, but of course, I mean, I have my ritual. So I have my little Ganesh that I carry with me whenever I move around. That keeps me company here on the desk, and I have a couple of things. I have some ritual things I call. I need to put order. That might be because I'm born in Switzerland, but the vanity are also very tidy. So I need to put order everywhere and obsessively my desk all around me before I start writing, definitely. So there is that ritual. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I have any weirder ritual than that, honestly, aside from my little Ganesh that comes to mind right now. But it's not that weird, it's cute. And it just maybe helps me reminds me that even from a rational point of view, icons sometimes are useful to focus and to bring you back, and he's a writer also, Ganesh, with his tasks. So I find that it's a good, it's the only thing that I can think of right now, my little traveling Ganesh with me. But aside from that, no, I don't wear anything weird or tie my hair in a ponytail or anything, or braids or anything now that it's long. No, I'll think about it. If I do, I'll write back if I think of something that I can reveal. But I'm not holding back. I just can't think of anything else.
Thank you for the honest answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you strikingly expressed, and I quote from your book, bending over backwards is what is always necessary to bring about a true, deep change. Putting yourself in a painful and difficult position and opening yourself up while facing the void, allowing a new you to be born. Stop quote. Thank you, Carlo, for today's engaging and inspiring session. Your book, Bending Over Backwards, is an honest, heartfelt memoir, and we loved reading and interacting with you. We wish you all the best for future endeavors. Thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to your next book. And thank you, Suryodaya members.
Thank you all for listening. It was nice talking to you. Thank you.